Hi everyone. Today we're talking to Ada Tong. Ada is an actuary and she is currently the product director of property data solutions at Domain. Ada started her career as a GI actuary and then moved into analytics and data science. She's worked across airlines, loyalty programs, banking, insurance, retail and property. And she says that despite the diverse range of work that she's done, the theme that brings everything together is doing all the things that actually makes data useful. Ada, thank you so much for joining us today.
No worries, my pleasure.
So you're an actuary, but you're the product director of property data solutions at Domain. Tell me, how did you get that job? What is it that an actuary can do in that sort of role, and how did you get there?
How did I? Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm proud to say I'm not the only actuary at Domain. We have another actuary. I was really excited to find out in our research team. So maybe I'll start with telling you a bit about my role and what I currently do, and then we can sort of talk a bit about my journey here. And it was probably a series of half steps towards this, but yeah, you don't probably expect to find an actuary or more than one actuary working at Domain. So my current role, product director of property data solutions at Domain. My team looks after our data products. So probably the most well-known data product that we have is our valuation product. So if you go on domain.com.au and you look up your property in our home price guide, you'll be able to see a valuation of your property. So that's obviously really engaging for consumers, but it's also a product that we sell to banks. So the banks use that number, that estimate that we produce to help them approve loans. And we have a whole series of other products that we're forming as well as discovering, and we're looking to grow this business unit. My role is in product, which probably is a discipline that may not be familiar to most actuaries, actually. Product management in sort of technology companies is something that's probably developed, I guess, in the last 10 to 15 years, sort of coming out of Silicon Valley. You have product managers in insurance companies, which I think a lot of actuaries would be familiar with, and it's not a dissimilar role. But we're thinking about technology products. So Domain is a technology product. It's a portal. It's a business which generates revenue, and you need someone to look after that product. And just like a product manager in an insurance company pulls together, all sorts of different disciplines to put the product together, that's what product does in a technology company. And if I think about how to describe the product role, the really important things are you really need to understand the needs of your customer. So there's a lot of customer research that you do, with the support of your researchers. It's therefore really important to understand data and analytics, because a lot of the research, actually, especially in technology products, you think about Domain, a lot of the research actually and how you understand your customers comes through the data that we collect on the portal. That's one really big element. And then the other big element you need to understand is the business. So how do these technology products make money? And if you actually think about Domain, it's not the simplest business model. It's a marketplace model, which means that you're engaging customers, encouraging customers to come to the portal so that you can make money from a different group of people, agents who are encouraging their vendors to list on Domain. So that's, you actually really need to understand.
Really interesting ecosystem, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. And, you look at technology products, there's all sorts of different business models out there. There's marketplaces, there's SaaS business models, but you really need to understand the business and the commercial requirements, and you need to put that customer piece and that business piece together to ensure that you're prioritizing the right things to build, the right things for the engineering team to build.
And when you put it that way, Ada, it's not dissimilar from what actuaries would do in an insurance company or a more traditional role, because it's still about understanding the business, understanding the context, and bringing all that information together, and still putting the customer, whoever that customer is, at the centre of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So some real parallels there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really fun role because you get that really big picture thinking. You get to deal with all sorts of different types of people. But at the end of the day, you're working very closely with a team of software engineers or data analysts to put together a product and then to keep iterating and improving that product. So yeah, it's a really fun role.
Good. And so how did you, so despite the parallels, how did you get from, GI
That's right.
actuary to property data actuary and, looking at a technology product and
Yeah.
what you're doing now?
So I started my career as a GI actuary doing reserving in spreadsheets like, many of us did.
Yeah.
And at the time was just interested in doing, I was in consulting. I was just interested in different things. I was just looking around and looking for different things to do. And I worked, so sort of moved from GI into banking, our banking team at the time. This was at PwC several years ago now. And then just a few years ago. And then now I'm going to tell you exactly how many years ago that was because the GFC hit when I was in the banking team. And at that time, then it was very much a, okay, banking wasn't the best place to focus our energies during a global financial crisis. So ended up spending a lot of time working and looking to work with Qantas Loyalty, so frequent flyer program. And that's really where my interest got piqued in non-traditional uses of data and actuarial skills. And so took on Qantas frequent flyer as a client and was doing, started doing quite an actuarial piece of work initially for them. It was estimating points liability, which is not dissimilar to estimating claims liability. We use many of the same techniques, but really enjoyed working with that client and then got involved in some other more, I guess, marketing analytics type projects with them. And yeah, had a heap of fun doing that and sort of really was interested in taking my career into, more analytics rather than actuarial. And at that time, Quantium was probably only, I guess, a couple of years old at the time. And they were, they were the company which was doing that. They were looking at doing, using data and using analytics and actuarial techniques in different industries. So I went to join Quantium and did a bunch of fun sort of different types of work at Quantium, working with shopping centres, banks, just insurance. Like did a whole bunch of stuff in a really short time. Guess that was the growth stage of the company at the time. There was just lots going on, and it was a really busy but really rewarding time of my career. And then was just at that stage of life where I really wanted to try going overseas, like many young Australians do, and moved to Hong Kong to work. Ended up staying in Hong Kong for 3 years. And as I mentioned, I'd done a lot of work with Qantas frequent flyer. So when I moved over to Hong Kong without a job at the time, I was just basically looking for opportunities in areas which I knew. And one of I talked to Asia Miles, which is Cathay Pacific's loyalty program, and ended up getting a role there. And like really interesting, it was an analytics role. I was doing sort of very similar types of work that I did at Qantas frequent flyer. But interestingly, the CEO at Asia Miles had just come back from MBA that he did at Stanford and had come across this concept of design thinking, which a lot of, I don't know how many actuaries are across that term, but it's about human-centered design, and it's about thinking about when you build things, or whether it's businesses or data models or anything, you take a human-centered approach to doing that. And there's a process they sort of map out about empathizing with your users and then prototyping to really make sure whatever you build is fit for use. I really enjoyed that training and really loved the concepts in it. And that sort of started piquing, I sort of then piqued my interest in this concept of product. And I'd very much worked in consulting for many years in Australia, but saw a lot of opportunity for us to think about the work we did as consultants as a product, and thinking about how to make it a lot more scalable. So in Hong Kong, like I ended up, when we were deciding whether or not to move back to Sydney, I ended up doing a period where I was just working for a bunch of different startups and, doing a bit of data, doing a bit of sort of dashboard design and different sorts of things, and getting exposure to lots of new ideas, and probably mostly getting a lot of exposure to quite an entrepreneurial way of thinking. When you work a lot with startups and in that sort of, that ecosystem, you get exposed to a different,
mindset.
A different mindset. And that was super fun, but I sort of took the design thinking and some of that startup thinking, entrepreneurial thinking back into my role when I came back to Sydney in Quantium, and sort of the Quantium was on a similar journey, starting to think about products. And whilst I was at Quantium, then made the move into product management and very much focused on data products.
That's really interesting. So it sounds like, because often people think when they're moving from, say GI into analytics, do they need to do some additional training or another course? As actuaries, we're conditioned to think that we need to keep doing more exams to be qualified to do something new, right? But, you just said that, in order to get from a traditional actuarial role, a GI reserving role, into the interesting work that you're doing at Domain, nowhere in there have you said, oh, I went and did a Master of Data Science, or I went and, did all this other technical training. You've talked about, design thinking and, changing mindset and entrepreneurial thinking and, the design thinking course that you were talking about, and just trying some different things and reaching out. So did you do any other sort of technical training to help you with the technical skills that you needed to get there?
I haven't. I've done a lot of learning along the way. Not a lot of that was through formal sort of university training. I did, there was a lot of trial and error in there. I sort of tell it a bit like a story, like, it was all planned. It certainly wasn't.
Okay.
And at every step, I definitely, I was looking for something different, and I'd explore a few different options. So, when I was at PwC really early on, I started a Masters of Economics because I was really interested in behavioral economics. That didn't quite go the way, I was hoping it to. So I ended up dropping out of that. But in terms of training, there's so much available these days online, and you don't necessarily need the formal qualification. I've done a bunch of Coursera courses. Like when I moved into data science, I did a bunch of Coursera courses to get me up to speed.
To brush up on those skills and to learn
new skills. One of the first courses on Coursera is that when Coursera launched was a machine learning course that was run by Andrew Ng, who's was at Stanford at the time, and he's an amazing teacher. And it was great learning about some of those new concepts that I could then, that helped me a lot when I moved into the data science world, because as actuaries we have certain techniques in our bag. You work with all sorts of different people, and when you work with data scientists who have a different set of skills in the bag, it's useful to be able to communicate. Now, a Coursera course is not going to make me an expert in any way, shape or form, but it allows me to have
it's been enough to support your sort of career journey and to be sufficiently skilled to move into those different areas.
Yeah,
and that takes a lot of courage, doesn't it, to step outside your comfort zone?
Yes and no, but I'd also say in some ways, but a lot of what I've done is small half steps.
Okay. So baby steps.
Yeah, lots of baby steps. And I guess there is a little bit of being okay with doing something that other people haven't done before.
Mm.
Um,
Was that something that came easily to you, or?
I think I always trusted myself that, okay, if this didn't work out, and sort of my experience has sort of helped reinforce it, that I'd try something new, and if it didn't work out, I could always go back and change course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think, yeah, there's small half steps, taking calculated risks, yeah, and having fun along the way.
Yeah, following what you find interesting and enjoyable. Yeah, it makes for a great career, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about your role at Domain. We've talked about your career path to getting there. We've talked a bit about your actuarial training and its sort of transferability. Was there anything else that you wanted to share along those lines? How having an actuarial background can help you have a non-traditional actuarial career?
The actuarial training is actually really has been so useful for me in very intangible ways that most people probably wouldn't think about. Like in my current role as a product manager, there's a couple of things that being an actuary has helped me with: the analytical thinking, and I guess one thing actuarial trains you in is thinking about systems. Mm-hmm. And thinking about systems, thinking about how to model that, and thinking about risks. And that's a really useful framework in a product role, because your product exists within a system, and you're trying to often you're trying to change behavior. And if you've got that sort of systemic thinking, it can really help you structure how you think and can help you make decisions. I think actuarial thinking, that sort of risk-based approach and the way actuaries think about risk, really helps us make decisions. One thing I think that I see a bit in business is, especially in this age of big data, people want more and more data to be able to make decisions. Mm-hmm. And actuaries have trained really well in making decisions without full data. Mm-hmm. And it's actually one of the skills, right? When do you make decisions? Do you wait to get more data, or is it better to make the decision now? And, you know, that sort of balance, you don't want to get stuck in analysis paralysis. And having a risk framework in your head to be able to think about that has been, I think, super useful for me in my current role. Mm-hmm. And also just the ability to think commercially. I do think actuaries are taught to think about business and about how businesses work. I always say, you know, if you can understand how an insurance company business model works, you can understand insurance companies' financial statements. You know, you're really well set up to understand other business models, and that's, you know, as you know, I described the product manager role. That's a really key part of what you do as a product manager. So, and probably countless ways I can't think of, you know, along my journey. Definitely actuaries, I think, make great data scientists. Again, that systems thinking. You know, you're not just chucking a bunch of features into a model and setting a machine off to predict something. You're thinking about, here's the problem, here's all the different factors which might affect that. And yeah, just relating it more to the real world. So yeah, I'm really glad I did actuarial studies.
Yeah, so it all sounds like it's given you a really great grounding and quite transferable skills beyond, you know, because sometimes people think, oh, but I know how to, you know, calculate a reserve for a GI product. How does that, you know, qualify me to do other things? But it's not the actual output of what you're doing. It's the problem solving and the context, and, you know, understanding the risks, and then being able to transfer that across. That systems thinking has so many applications.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, not just insurance, but technology products, but government, and you know, lots of different things. Understanding how things fit together is a very valuable skill, just being able to think that way.
Yeah.
And put a risk framework around it as well.
Yeah. I mean, any organisation is a system, right?
Yeah.
We talked about government, and I know you do a lot of government work. Governments are systems, businesses are systems, and they're all made up of people. And I think that's the other piece that actuaries are trained to think about. You know, we do put numbers in a spreadsheet, but we also do know they represent people. And being able to sort of flick between that, you know, here are the numbers and here's what it represents, but here's the uncertainty around it because it's all about behavior is, just super useful experience and super useful framework for thinking about problems.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it, when you start to think about people and behaviour, and you said you started some behavioural economics work. I think sometimes it's easy to just look at those numbers in a spreadsheet and just take them as given, but really you've got people behind those numbers, and that adds a really interesting dimension to that as well. So something that needs to be considered as part of your solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about sort of other professions. You talked about data scientists and, you know, learning from other people from different disciplines. What do you think actuaries in general can learn from other professions outside the actual profession?
Yeah, I've worked with many different sort of professions through my career so far. I've really enjoyed working with engineers and technologists. And to be honest, like I haven't been doing traditional actuarial work for a little while now, but if I think about a lot of the engineering practices I learn about through my engineering colleagues, I think that they would have made such a difference to me when I was, you know, in those GI reserving days. So just, I guess, the way engineers think about building software in a production way. So I remember, and this was a while ago and practices may have changed, but, you know, I was building spreadsheets, you know, to run every month or every quarter or whatever it may be. But, you know, I was doing a lot of manual work. It was all one big spreadsheet. You know, engineers have these concepts of, you know, you want to make sure you modularize what you're doing so that if one part breaks, you can test it properly and you can isolate that part. But also, so the practices around how to build really robust, reliable machines to do things, and to make it a lot more efficient, and also just agile practices around how to get things done efficiently and quickly. So, you know, I'm still learning. I still have a lot to learn, but I've really enjoyed working with engineers.
Yeah, very good, very good. So understanding a bit more sort of different way of approaching the same sorts of problems that we would approach, and taking their learnings from that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very valuable. So, okay, so we've talked a bit about your career, current role, how you got into a non-traditional role. Keen to hear from you personally now, because I know you've got small children and juggling big, challenging roles at home with your work. So how have you found, as you've become more senior, and I know that, you know, small children is not everyone's, you know, what they're all juggling, but how do you find managing work-life balance as you get more senior? You know, you've got more pressure at work, and then, you know, other things at home as well to juggle.
Yeah, really good question. So a couple of thoughts. I remember when I first was about to have my first child, I was about to go on maternity leave. A colleague of mine gave me some advice, which was, from now on, you need to get used to the fact that you can't do everything you want to at work and at home. There's only so many hours in a day, and, you know, I know pre-kids, you'd get to 5 o'clock and still have something to do, and you'd be able to just keep going and wrap it up. And, you know, there was a little bit more flex in sort of finding time to do what you want to do, but definitely with kids, you know, time's limited.
You can't do that.
No, I can't do that. So it's a little bit, it's definitely, that was really good advice. Sort of
just adjusting your expectations.
Yeah, adjusting expectations. But then also being really ruthless with prioritization. To be honest, I probably spend too much time actually prioritizing. I'd love to refine my process so I'm not like spending all my time prioritizing. And I use also, I use Trello boards to help me figure out my to-do list and stuff. But it's
do your personal stuff as well?
Yes.
Right.
We have a family. We do have a family Trello board.
Family Trello board. I love it.
So I'd say on the, it's a juggle. And I guess you have to be okay with just being a bit flexible and not being so hard on yourself. That's one thing. Ruthless prioritization on both sides, on both work and home life. In terms of work, I think, I've experimented with all sorts of different working arrangements. When I came back from mat leave, I was doing 1.5 days a week, and I've done 3 days a week. I've done 4 days a week. I've done all sorts of different arrangements. But I think when you're doing flexible working arrangements like that, it's important to be really clear about your boundaries, both and with your colleagues, but also with yourself. So if I don't work Thursdays, I don't work Thursdays. And, I spend a fair amount of time telling people, oh, I can't go to that meeting. I don't work Thursdays. As
you say it like that. So if someone says, oh, can we meet Thursday afternoon? You'll say, I don't work Thursdays. Can we make it Friday? Or
I just remind people, oh, I don't work Thursdays. If you want me, can we move it to another time? Or you miss meetings and you just have to be okay with catching up later. And the more you do it, the more you realize, oh, I'm not so important that I need to be in every single meeting. You let, other people get on with things, and you realize you don't need to be involved in everything. So I think being really clear on those boundaries with yourself, first of all, because that's the most important thing. And then that allows you to be clear with other people, and setting the expectations at work for that. And just, gently reminding people, because it's not everyone else's job to remember what you're doing. And not getting upset, when people forget, just gently reminding people. And then from a home perspective, I think, it's the same, like prioritizing, know what's important. So, this afternoon, it's important, I'm picking up my daughter at 4:00. I know that's important. So I'm going to miss a meeting, or I'm going to probably be dialed in, on my way there. And, I want to be there and I want to be present. So, just making those calls on what you need and don't need to do. Getting help where you need to with the home stuff. Like I've it's different for everybody, but my time with the kids is really important. So I try to prioritize that, cleaning and stuff I get help with, whatever works for each person's family. The other thing is getting support from your partner. I've been incredibly lucky. Daniel, if he's watching this, so he can give himself a pat on the back, but he really
well done, Daniel.
He does share a lot of the load. And actually one thing that was really great that we did last year, so I think part of the problem a lot of the time is this is in very traditional family structures, but you go on mat leave, and then you pick up all the home stuff, all the kids stuff, you pick up all that load
while you're on leave, because
you're the one who's not working, and then you start going back to work part-time and you keep all that load. But one thing we did, so last year my husband took a career break, and he was it was 2020 actually. It was the start of the pandemic, so it was great timing in some ways. But he was the sort of full-time at-home parent. And he did things his own way, but he was looking after all that, and that actually got us into a really good rhythm when we were both working again, that we shared things a lot more evenly. So yeah,
Yeah.
you just sort of make things work as they go through. I don't know whether I have any solutions which solve it, but
I think there's some great tips there. And, you know, having also raised kids myself, and mine are sort of at the other end of childhood and, you know, young adulthood, totally agree with everything you've said, especially that bit about just sharing the load. Like, this is not just about mums juggling everything. This is about families juggling things. And, you know, as the kids get older, they can step up and do some things too. But yeah, my husband was a stay-at-home dad for quite a long time as well. And I think it's just helpful for everyone to understand what it's like for the other one as well. And, you know, makes for easier sort of discussions around how to share the load. So
yeah, absolutely.
Good on you guys. Good on you guys. Okay, so final question for today. Wanting to hear your tips on becoming a great actuarial leader. So for people stepping into their first management roles, or maybe sort of aspiring to their first management roles, what tips would you have for actuaries who are making that transition from doing the technical work themselves to managing other people?
I think the first tip is not to just expect that you're meant to know how to do this leadership or management thing just because someone's called you a manager. There's actually some really great training out there, and lots of books you can read, and it is a different skill set to, you know, technical skill sets. And I've, you know, most recently Domain's put me through some leadership training, and it's been really great. And like the training I did had lots of quite analytical frameworks about how to think about management or leadership problems, which I loved, you know, being an analytical person. Probably, you know, one that comes to mind, if, you know, I think about, you know, thinking about managing a team and coaching people and staff is a framework around will and skill. So you sort of imagine a matrix of whether someone has a will to do something versus not, and someone has the skill to do something versus not. And then you have the different quadrants. You can probably look it up on Google and you'd get a better description of it. But that's been a really useful framework for me to think about people and how to support them, how to coach them and help develop them. So yeah, my biggest tip is, yeah, not to expect that you know how to do it all, but look for resources and look for help. Yeah.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So we've covered so much, Ada, thank you. So we've talked about the parallels between traditional actuarial roles and non-traditional actuarial roles, and how a lot of that thinking is actually quite transferable, and the skills that we're taught as actuaries in terms of systems thinking and understanding risks and putting customers at the centre. Those things are transferable whether or not you're working, you know, as a reserving or pricing actuary, or in insurance or in financial services, or whether you're doing property work for a technology product like Domain. And you've also talked about the importance of learning from others. You've talked about the some tips around, I love the family Trello board. I think that's really cool. I'm going to have a look at that. Tips for work-life balance as you get older, just and you've got more seniority and more challenges, just you know, managing your own expectations, but also setting boundaries about what you can and can't do, and then readjusting and shifting as things change over time. And then finally, your tips around stepping into management and leadership roles, and being okay with the fact that you don't need to magically know that when you're stepping into those roles, but there's lots of resources and support to help you with that transition. So some really, really great insight. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today. Was there anything else that you would like to share before we wrap up?
No, but it was really fun talking, Julia. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Thanks so much, Ada.